If you are trying to figure out how to stop thinking about your avoidant ex, the first thing worth understanding is that the intensity of the thoughts is not a reflection of how healthy or unhealthy the relationship was. You can know with complete certainty that someone was emotionally unavailable, that the connection was inconsistent, that the dynamic left you more anxious than at peace, and still find your mind circling back to them dozens of times a day. That is not confusion or weakness. It is the predictable outcome of a very specific neurological situation that your attachment system got trained into, and it has a clear explanation rooted in how your brain processes both reward and loss. Amir Levine's research at Columbia University on adult attachment, which formed the foundation of his work on anxious and avoidant attachment styles, reveals that when an anxious attacher pairs with an avoidant partner, the nervous system of the anxious person enters a state of chronic activation. Your attachment system, designed to seek closeness and safety with a bonded partner, keeps firing distress signals because it never found the stable landing it was seeking. The avoidant partner's pattern of withdrawing whenever intimacy deepened meant your system never fully relaxed into felt security. That unresolved activation does not simply switch off when the relationship ends. Your nervous system is still scanning for the resolution it never found, and your thoughts about your ex are partly that scan continuing in the absence of its target. Anna Lembke at Stanford University, one of the leading researchers on dopamine and compulsive behavior, describes how unpredictable rewards create far more powerful conditioning than consistent ones. This is the neurological reason a slot machine keeps people at the lever far longer than a predictable reward machine would. Your avoidant ex was providing exactly this pattern, warmth and closeness, just often enough to maintain your dopamine system's expectation, then pulling back, then reconnecting again. Each reconnection produced a surge of relief and reward in your brain's nucleus accumbens, reinforcing the value of that relationship in your neural architecture more powerfully than a consistently available, reliably loving partner would have. The result is that your brain has learned to treat that person as unusually significant, and that learned significance does not delete itself when the relationship ends. One of the most persistently overlooked drivers of post-breakup fixation is what psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik documented at the University of Berlin. The human mind gives far more mental real estate to unfinished situations than to completed ones. Relationships with avoidant people frequently end without genuine closure, without honest explanation, without the kind of mutual understanding that allows the emotional chapter to feel complete. Your mind keeps returning to your ex not necessarily because the relationship was right for you, but because the ending never gave your brain the resolution it needs to file the experience away. There are loose threads everywhere, things that were never said, moments that were never understood, questions that were never answered. Your thoughts are your brain still pulling on those threads. Sue Johnson's emotionally focused therapy research, developed at the University of Ottawa, offers a critical insight that many people in this situation find genuinely clarifying. The intense craving you feel for someone who is consistently emotionally unavailable is often misread by your own brain as evidence that the connection was unique, really deep and special. In reality, what you are experiencing is attachment hunger, the activated longing of a nervous system that was regularly deprived of the secure contact it needs. That hunger feels significant because it is intense, but intensity is a measurement of activation, not of meaning. Understanding the difference between genuine intimacy and the craving created by consistent emotional deprivation can help you begin to relate to the thoughts differently, not as proof that this person was uniquely right for you, but as information about what your nervous system was yearning for throughout the relationship. John Bowlby's foundational research on attachment, developed through his decades at the Tavistock Clinic in London, describes what he called protest behaviors, the searching, yearning, and obsessive thinking that the attachment system generates when access to a bonding figure is disrupted. What matters for your situation is that these behaviors were almost certainly already active during the relationship, because your avoidant ex's characteristic withdrawal repeatedly activated your attachment system's alarm. You spent months or years in a kind of low-grade protest, trying to restore closeness with someone who kept creating distance. That protest pattern is now continuing even in their absence, because your attachment system never got the message that the situation resolved. It is still trying to fix something that the relationship itself never allowed to be fixed. Memory encoding works against you in a very specific way after a relationship with an avoidant person ends. The moments of genuine connection, the times when they were warm and present and close, tend to be encoded with unusually high emotional intensity precisely because they stood out against a backdrop of emotional distance. Joseph Ledoux's work at NU on emotional memory shows that high arousal emotional events are stamped with particular strength by the amygdala, making them unusually vivid and easily retrievable. Meanwhile, the more chronic, lower intensity experience of emotional unavailability fades into background noise in memory. What this creates is a highly selective highlight reel. Your brain gives you the beautiful connected moments in high definition and the years of quiet emotional distance in low contrast. No wonder the thoughts feel so compelling. They are drawing on your most vivid stored experiences. There is actually a quiet 3D game built around exactly this kind of inner work, called Inner Phoenix. But let me keep going through the practical strategies before we get there, because understanding the mechanisms gives the strategies real traction. No contact is the most important and most difficult structural piece of recovering from this specific pattern. Philip Shaver at UC Davis has spent decades studying how attachment systems update their expectations, and the research is clear. Every interaction with an avoidant X reactivates the seeking cycle and resets the neurological clock. Even neutral or cold contact provides enough stimulation to restart the dopamine anticipation loop. Your brain is looking for evidence that the relationship is truly over, and every text, every check-in, every accidental meeting provides contradictory data that keeps the attachment system on alert. Consistent, maintained, no contact is not a game or a manipulation tactic. It is a neurological necessity for your brain to gradually update its expectations and begin the slow process of recalibration. Creating your own closure ritual addresses the Zeigarnik problem directly. Robert Niemeyer at the University of Memphis, whose work on meaning reconstruction after loss is among the most respected in the field, describes how people can generate their own sense of completion when the relationship itself did not provide it. This can take different forms. Writing a letter you never send, creating a symbolic ending ceremony for yourself, or making a deliberate internal statement that you are choosing to consider the situation resolved on your own terms. The goal is not to feel nothing. It is to give your mind a reference point that says this chapter is complete, so it can stop searching for a resolution that the other person is not going to provide. You do not need their participation to close what is open inside you. Mario Mikulincer at Bar-Ilan University has studied what he calls attachment security priming, the way that even brief experiences of felt security with others can measurably shift the attachment system's baseline state. For people recovering from anxious-avoidant dynamics, this research points to something practical. The consistent experience of secure, reciprocal connection with friends, family members, or a therapist gradually re-educates your nervous system about what connection can actually feel like. Your attachment system learned one pattern through repeated exposure to a specific relational dynamic. It can learn a different pattern through repeated exposure to a genuinely different dynamic. This is slower and less dramatic than romantic intensity, but it is far more neurologically stabilizing, and it directly reduces the craving that keeps thoughts of your avoidant ex so intrusive. Dopamine regulation through deliberate engagement in rewarding activities is one of the most accessible and evidence-supported strategies for reducing fixation. Nora Volkow at the National Institute on Drug Abuse has researched how the brain responds to reward substitution, and the findings are relevant here. Engaging consistently in activities that produce genuine pleasure and meaning, creative work, physical movement, social laughter, learning something new, provides your dopamine system with alternative sources of reward that gradually reduce its dependence on the memory of your ex as its primary reference point for anticipated reward. This is not about distraction in the avoidant sense. It is about actively and deliberately building new dopamine pathways, so the old ones are not the only option your brain keeps reaching for. Understanding the architecture of avoidant attachment can itself become a tool for reducing the pull of fixation. Daniel Siegel at UCLA's Mindsight Institute describes how insight into relational patterns changes the way those patterns operate in the nervous system. When you understand that your ex's emotional withdrawal was driven by their own early learned defenses, their own attachment system's response to intimacy as threatening, it becomes harder to keep running the narrative where the withdrawal meant something was wrong with you. Their avoidance was not a verdict on your worth. It was a description of their own fear. That shift in perspective does not erase the pain, but it removes one of the most toxic layers of it, the self-blame that turns grief into shame. Somatic work is essential in this particular recovery because so much of what you are carrying is stored in the body, not just the mind. Peter Levine at the Somatic Experiencing Institute describes how the nervous system holds incomplete stress responses as physical tension patterns long after the triggering situation has passed. If you are consistently hypervigilant in your relationship, always scanning for signs of withdrawal, always braced for the next emotional retreat, your body learned to maintain that state as its baseline. Practices that address nervous system regulation directly, slow intentional breathing, grounding exercises, gentle movement, even cold water on the face to activate the dive reflex, help your body begin to downregulate from that chronic readiness state. As your body settles, the intrusive thoughts tend to lose some of their urgency because the physiological alarm driving them quiets. Emotionally focused therapy, the approach developed and researched primarily by Sue Johnson at the Ottawa Couple and Family Institute, is one of the most evidence-supported therapeutic frameworks specifically for attachment-related distress. Working with a therapist trained in EFT or in attachment-based approaches gives you something you cannot fully provide for yourself: a regulated, responsive relational experience in real time. Your nervous system learns what it learns through relational experience, not through information alone. Therapy offers what the avoidant relationship could not: a consistent, attuned presence that neither pursues nor withdraws, that can hold your emotional experience without becoming overwhelmed by it or pulling back from it. Over time, this experience becomes evidence that safe connection is real and available, which is precisely the evidence your attachment system is most desperate for. James Pennybucker at the University of Texas at Austin found through decades of research on expressive writing that translating emotional experience into language produces measurable improvements in psychological well-being that go beyond what simply thinking about the experience provides. There is something specific that happens when you write about what you went through. You are forced to give it sequence, shape, and language, which engages the narrative-making systems of the brain and gradually converts raw, diffuse emotional material into something more organized and contained. For this particular situation, keeping a record of your thought frequency and intensity over weeks can also serve a second purpose. It gives you concrete evidence that the pattern is shifting, which counters the distorted belief that the thoughts will never improve. Progress that is documented feels more real than progress that is only sensed. Self-compassion is not a peripheral or supplementary element of this process. Kristen Neff at the University of Texas at Austin has demonstrated in study after study that self-compassion measurably reduces psychological distress, lowers cortisol, and improves the capacity to process difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. One of the most painful and unnecessary layers of suffering in this situation is the self-judgment that gets layered on top of the original pain. The belief that you should be over this by now, that thinking about an avoidant ex makes you weak or pathetic, that the fact that you still care proves something is fundamentally wrong with you. None of that is true. What is true is that you formed a genuine bond, you were subjected to a genuinely activating relational pattern, and your nervous system is doing exactly what human nervous systems do. Meeting that experience with even a fraction of the warmth you would offer a close friend going through the same thing changes the neurological environment for healing. Physical exercise is one of the most underappreciated tools available because it operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Wendy Suzuki at NU has studied how aerobic exercise changes brain chemistry and found that even a single moderate session increases dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine in ways that directly suppress ruminative thinking for several hours. Exercise also reduces cortisol, the primary stress hormone that keeps your threat detection system hyperactive and your thoughts looping, and it builds new neural pathways through physical challenge and novelty that do not involve your ex at all. If this video is giving you something useful, hitting like genuinely helps more people going through this specific attachment struggle find this content when they are searching for answers. A 20-minute walk at a brisk pace is enough to produce measurable neurochemical changes that quiet the mental loop for hours. The longer view here is grounded in what Michael Merdzenik at UCS has demonstrated about neuroplasticity across decades of research. The brain rewires based on what you repeatedly do and experience. The neural pathways that produce your thoughts about your avoidant ex were built through thousands of interactions, hours of hypervigilant monitoring, countless small dopamine hits of hope followed by withdrawal. They are not going to dissolve overnight, and they are not going to dissolve through willpower alone. but they will weaken over time as you consistently expose your nervous system to new relational experiences, new sources of reward, new evidence about what connection can feel like. And the pathways that are not being consistently fed will gradually thin, the way any unused neural pathway does. Your brain built this fixation pattern through experience, and experience is also exactly how it unbuilds it. What you are ultimately working toward is not the absence of feeling, not the erasure of someone who genuinely mattered to you, but the gradual quieting of the alarm. The day will come when a memory surfaces and it carries weight without urgency, when the thought of your ex no longer triggers the physiological cascade of seeking and yearning and panic. That shift does not happen all at once. It happens in small increments, through consistency rather than intensity, through showing up for yourself with patience and care rather than demanding that your nervous system perform healing on a timeline it cannot meet. And hey, there is a 3D game called Inner Phoenix. You walk through it like a quiet temple, with rooms for what you are observing about your attachment patterns, what you are feeling, what you need, and what you might try next. It was made for exactly these in-between moments. No pressure. It is in the description below whenever you are ready. Subscribing also helps this kind of content reach others navigating these difficult attachment patterns.